that includes Indigenous communities. In the fall of 2017, the BSWG released a 15-page report, Out of Sight, which contains the BSWG's interim recommendations, along with a summary of the events leading up to Brian Sinclair's death and the institutional responses to it. Endnote 3. The work of the BSWG constitutes a valuable archive of the lived immediacy of colonization and resistance in the everyday, ordinary present. The work of the BSWG and other resources are compiled on the For Brian Sinclair webpage, created and maintained by BSWG member and University of Manitoba librarian Janice Linton. Endnote 4. Structures of Indifference aims to augment the work of the BSWG and locate Sinclair's life and death within the overlapping histories of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Canadian hospitals and healthcare, particularly healthcare and services for Indigenous people. In putting Sinclair's story in historical context, we draw on our collective expertise as historians. In McCallum's case, of Indigenous people, healthcare, and gender in 20th century Canada. In Perry's, of colonialism and Western Canada in the 19th and 20th centuries. Our primary archive is the substantial one created by the inquest that examines Sinclair's death. The inquest was held in Winnipeg in 2 phases. The first, in August and October of 2013, ran for 32 days and heard evidence from 74 witnesses. The second phase was shorter and more limited in scope. Early in the second phase, Brian Sinclair's family members and 2 important Indigenous organizations, Aboriginal Legal Services, a Toronto-based legal advocacy organization, and Ganikanitchik, a Winnipeg organization that offers culturally based and Indigenous-led social services, withdrew, having lost confidence in the inquest process. The second phase of the inquest met in January and February of 2014 and heard from 10 witnesses. Endnote 5. The transcript of testimony to both phases of the inquest totals 4,653 pages. Manitoba courts released a 200-page report on the inquest in December of 2014. Endnote 6. That this material is available online is largely owing to the fact that the Sinclair family, early in the inquest, petitioned the court to have the transcripts made public and free of cost. Endnote 7. These materials produced through and around Sinclair's death are a particular kind of archive. Scholars of colonialism have argued that we need to be mindful of the shape of and work done by the records of colonial states. Anne Laura Stoller argues that we should pay attention not only to colonialism's archival content, but to its particular and sometimes peculiar form, and view colonial archives as both transparencies on which power relations were inscribed and intricate technologies of rule in themselves. Our social historians' training in reading against the grain, or from below, does not serve us well here. Instead, Stoller urges us to read along the archival grain, to attend to what the colonial archive offers and the multiple kinds of work that it does. Endnote 8. For example, the records of the inquest into Brian Sinclair's death are a window into a particular legal process defined in Canadian law. This process is not designed to illuminate the broader historical and colonial context in which events take place. Rather, the context is narrowly defined to make blanket recommendations on issues related to the inquest's interpretation of the event itself. As such, this archive reflects the precarious position of Indigenous people with respect to Canadian healthcare and justice, and how problematic this is for the care with which cases involving untimely deaths of Indigenous people are handled. Like Shireen Razak, we find that the inquest served to obscure the violence of colonialism. However, we wish to push this argument further by more precisely locating the inquest in specific histories of Indigenous people in Winnipeg and in Canadian hospitals. The specific mode of colonialism practiced in modern Canada is settler colonialism. Settler colonialism is sometimes defined as a form of colonialism where settlers came to stay, but that is too simple a definition. Mohawk scholar Audra Simpson explains that settler colonialism